Now, if you're interested in a low spreading ground covering plant that will give you lots of bright green foliage, spread out to about 10 to 12 inches or so wide and only gets to about 8 inches or so high, and then carries lots of these vivid bright pink glowing flowers in the earlier part of the growing season and then repeat through the rest of the growing season, let me introduce you to Dianthus Vivid Bright Light. And here's a selection, believe it or not, that has reached us all the way from Korea via our friends at Concept Plants in the Netherlands. Now, what's interesting about this selection is that it was bred by Kong Young Park at the National Institute of Horticulture in Korea. He made the cross in 2003 and then selected this particular one in 2005. Now, there's about 300 species or so of Dianthus located throughout the temperate world. And what he did is he crossed two separate European species, one called Alpinus that grows up in the Eastern Alps and in Austria, and then another more tricky to grow variety that comes from the Carpathian Mountains in Romania called Calaizonis. Crossing the two, he took the hardiness and reliability of those species, built-in garden performance, and then managed to very interestingly, get them to repeat flowering. Now, a lot of Dianthus tend to flower very well at the start of the year, but then kind of poop out when the hot weather strikes us during the summer months. Here's one that, believe it or not, if it's sheared back after the bulk of the flowers finish flowering, it will produce young growth again and then repeat cycles of flowering through the year. Always heaviest in the earlier part of the year and again in the fall, but nevertheless making these really bright, colorful mounds that spread out to make this delightful ground cover that just sparkles with bright color. No fragrance worth talking about, but lots and lots of these vivid pink flowers that will really make your eyes pop with color. So if you've got a sunny, well-drained position, and that's very important because these love to grow in a well-drained site and preferably a soil that's on the limey side of neutral. Sometimes it's even a good idea to fortify the soil a little bit with extra dressings of lime in springtime. And then when the flowers are beginning to go over, and there'll still be one or two on the clumps, but when most of them begin to go over, then you go in with a pair of hedging shears or pruners, just clip back the little spreading mounds, and you'll find that it'll produce lots of young buds that will pop out to produce these beautiful single flowers that put on such a terrific show. It's a plant that will grow very well on its own as a single specimen, but I would suggest that you think about planting this in larger drifts of color. Ideal for banks and hillsides, very nice for falling over the sides of walls, where it'll produce all of these gorgeous flowers as they kind of drape over the edges of the walls. Would look very nice kind of spreading out in between rocks in a rock or boulder garden, somewhere where you're going to be able to enjoy all the flowers. And you might also think about having this spreading out over the edges of paths and driveways too. Lots and lots of really good places where you're going to be able to enjoy this incredible, brightly colored little ground covering perennial that repeats during the growing season. This is Dianthus Vivid Bright Lights.